In this video series, we are going to be discussing how to crush small stakes poker tournaments. And in this video, we are going to be discussing specifically how to play well before the flop, because you have to make a decision every single hand before the flop. And if you consistently make even tiny errors, those errors are going to add up to make it very difficult for you to beat the small stakes games and nearly impossible for you to beat the medium and high stakes games. I'm Jonathan Little from mypokercoaching.com, and today we are going to be discussing pre-flop play from 3 points of view. First, stack depth. Second, position. And third, bet sizing. So let's get to it. Recognize that stack depth matters. Strategies change as stack depths change because you need a stronger hand to stack off, to put all your money in happily, as the stacks increase. For example, before the flop, a pair of nines is really good if you have 10 big blinds, but not so good if your opponent wants you to put in 200 big blinds. After the flop, top pair good kicker is great if you have 20 big blinds, but if your opponent wants you to put in 200, top pair good kicker is probably drawing thin or dead. So you're going to find that hands with implied odds, meaning they can put in a little bit of money now to potentially win a lot, go up in value as stack sizes increase and down in value as stack sizes decrease. Alternatively, big cards that can make top pair good kicker go up in value as stack depths decrease and down in value as stack depths increase. We're going to take a look at a few examples. Take it slowly. Follow along with me because there's a lot on this slide right here. We are discussing on the slide button RFI, which means raise first in ranges. This means everyone folds around to you on the button, and then you have to decide what to do. And essentially, you're going to play wider from in position as you get deeper stacked. Let's discuss this chart here first, the 80 big blind chart. Say you have 80 big blinds, and your opponents do as well. You're always playing the effective stack depth, which is the shortest stack among the players involved in the pot. Say you're 80 big blinds deep. You can raise with 55.6% of hands from the button, meaning you're folding 44.4% of hands. I realize these numbers are a little bit small, but as you can see here, you're raising all the pairs, any two cards suited that are 10 or higher, some suited gappers, suited connectors, etc., etc. And then all the ace-x offsuit, king-5 offsuit and better, and then these good but non-premium hands, like 10-7 offsuit, 8-7 offsuit, etc. Notice you're folding out hands like king-3 offsuit, jack-6 offsuit, 6-5 offsuit, 7-3 suited. You should not play those hands without a really good reason. Now, these charts presume your opponents play well. If the players in the blinds are too weak and tight and passive, you should probably raise a little bit wider. If they're going to be overly aggressive and re-raise a lot, you should probably be a little bit tighter. So always adjust to what they do incorrectly. As you can see, though, on the button, 80 big blinds deep, you can play about 55% of hands. 25 big blinds deep, though, if everyone is shallower, notice now you can only play 51% of hands. Let's take a look at what is not playing. Notice Jack-2 suited, 10-3 suited, and 10-2 suited are not playing on the suited side, as well as a few of these suited connected hands like 5-3 suited and 4-3 suited. Remember, high cards are going to go up in value as you get shallower. Also, 10-7, 9-7, and 8-7 offsuit are not playing, whereas a little bit of Queen-7 and Jack-7 offsuit are playing, which again kind of implies that you'd rather have junky Queen high than 8-7, because you're not going to make a straight that often, and when you do, you're only going to be able to win 25 big blinds from your opponent. So you'd rather play hands that make top pair a little bit more often. This may not seem like that big of an adjustment, but you're playing 5% fewer hands, which really does add up. Big adjustments start to happen as you get shallower, though. Here we have a 15 big blind chart, and notice now we're folding 60.7% of hands, which means we are playing 39% of hands, which is way tighter than when you're 25 big blinds deep. Notice here we're playing 50, here we're playing 40. That is a big decrease. And that's because essentially position is going to matter a little bit less. Notice 80 big blinds deep. You can raise with all sorts of stuff, and if your opponent flops something like middle or bottom pair, if you just bet the flop and the turn and blast the river, you put him in a pretty bad spot. 15 big blinds deep, though, if your opponent flops middle pair, they're just not folding, and you can't take advantage of your position quite as much. Also notice we introduce an all-in range. The hands in red just go all in for 15 big blinds, and the hands in purple are raising to 2 big blinds. So what just prefers to shove? We see pocket sixes and lower, goes all in. Ace-9 suited and lower, ace-queen offsuit and lower. Then we have some suited marginal hands and the offsuit Broadway hands all opt to just go all in from the button. While The absolute best hands, pocket sevens and better, and the suited Broadway hands that can raise and then call if your opponents go all in, are raising, as well as some hands that are not quite good enough to go all in with, that can raise and then fold if your opponent goes all in. Notice this purple range on the 15 big blind chart. This is referred to as a polarized strategy, meaning you're raising with your absolute best hands that can easily call it off against an all in, and then some hands that are not quite good enough to go all in that can raise and then fold. And that's going to make you difficult to play against, because when you raise to 2 big blinds, your opponents won't know if you have a really good hand or a weaker hand, and that puts them in a really difficult spot. Also notice, we're not going all in or folding. There are some apps out there or programs out there that recommend going all in or folding when you have 15 big blinds or fewer, or even 12 big blinds or fewer, or 10 big blinds or fewer. The game theory optimal strategy, the strategy that presumes your opponents play well and you're trying to play optimally against them, often has a min raising range, even 10 big blinds deep. And if you are blindly following a push or fold chart, an all in or fold chart, you're torching your money. Take those apps, delete them, and learn to play good, strong game theory optimal poker. Because if you play suboptimal strategies, you're going to lose money. And certainly the push fold charts are accurate if your only options are to go all in or fold, but we're not playing all in or hold 'em. We're playing no limit hold 'em. You have the option to min raise even off of a shallow stack. As you see though, these three strategies are very different, and it's purely based on your stack depth. Let's take a look at another spot where stack depth is vitally important. Here we have, again, 15 big blinds, 25 big blinds, and 80 big blinds. But now we're looking at when you're on the button versus a raise from the hijack. The hijack would be first to act if we were playing five-handed. So let's take a look at 80 big blinds deep. The hands in purple are re-raising. The hands in orange are calling, and the hands in, I'll call this green, are folding. So what I really want to look at here are the hands that are re-raising. The hands that are re-raising are the absolute best hands, something like pocket tens and better, ace queen suited and ace king offsuit, and then a bunch of hands that are on the cusp of playability. And notice the strategy is very mixed. Notice lots of ace x suited, king x suited, suited connectors, and offsuit big cards are re-raise bluffing some portion of the time, and that's designed to keep your opponent guessing. Whenever you re-raise them, they don't know if you have a really good hand that's never folding, the pocket tens and better, ace king and ace queen suited, or a hand that is just okay. While your calling range, the hands in orange, are all the hands that flop pretty well, which are going to be the rest of the pairs, suited aces, some suited kings, suited connectors and gappers, and a few offsuit big cards. Notice what is not playing, by the way. Notice all these charts are not playing the weaker hands, but hands like king 9 offsuit, ace 8 offsuit, queen 7 suited, 7-4 suited. All these hands are nowhere near good enough to play, and they must be folded. Okay, 25 big blinds deep. We again introduce this red color, which is all in. First, I want to note which hands are not playing in the 25 big blind chart that were playing in the 80 big blind chart. And you'll see primarily it's going to be some pocket threes and pocket twos. So you're just folding pocket twos to a raise on the button, as well as some of the suited gappers. Notice 10-7 suited, 9-7, 8-7, 7-6, 7-5, 6-5, 5-4, 5-3. All of these were playing 80 big blinds deep, because if you make a straight or a flush, you can win a ton of money from your opponent. But 25 big blinds deep, you cannot. All right, which hands are just ripping it all in? Going to be 10s, 9s, 8s, ace king offsuit, ace queen offsuit, king queen suited, king jack suited, king 10 suited, queen jack suited, jack 10 suited, and a few low ace x suited some portion of the time. These hands are fine. If your opponents fold, that's fantastic. And if they call, you're usually doing okay too. Take a look at the hands that are re-raising small. Again, a polarized strategy of the absolute best hands, aces, kings, queens, jacks, ace king, and ace queen suited, and then some hands that are not quite good enough to go all in, right? We see ace 9 offsuit, king 9 offsuit, queen jack offsuit, some junky stuff, right? Now what's calling? Again, all the hands that flop pretty well are calling, but notice this, like I said, a smaller calling range compared to when you are 80 big blinds deep. Notice the calling range here is 14%, whereas 80 big blinds deep, it was 17%. So a pretty big difference. Also notice you're just generally folding more 25 big blinds deep. 78% compared to 73% when you're 80 big blinds deep. All right, what about when we are 15 big blinds deep? Now things change a lot. Again, now we do not have a small re-raise range, because if someone makes it 2 big blinds and you make it, let's say 5, and they go all in, now you're getting the right pot odds to call. You'd have to put in 10 to win 30, and pretty much everything's going to win 33% of the time. So you don't get to have a small re-raise range. Instead, you're mostly just going all in, except for with a few hands that flop well enough that don't mind calling, plus aces to slow play, because you don't really care if your opponent sees the flop and makes some sort of a pair. However, notice the folding percentage. is very, very different. Now we're folding 84% of the time on the button, which is way higher than when we were playing 80 big blinds deep, right? So definitely take note of that. And in all these scenarios, we're playing the exact same position against the same opponent, but their strategy is going to be a little bit different, and our strategy is going to be a lot different based on our stack depth. Next, position matters a ton, because position gives you extra information about what your opponent's doing, because you get to act last when you're in position, and it lets you better control the size of the pot. And essentially, you're going to get to play much wider ranges as your position improves. Okay? Let's take a look at 40 big blinds deep. So now we're going to keep the stack depth the same, but what we're going to do now is consider how we're going to play from each position. Let's take a look again over here first. From the button, we already looked at a similar chart. We're playing about 51% of hands from the button when they fold to us. Fine and good. From the hijack, if we were first to act 5-handed, you see now we're only playing 29.5% of hands compared to 51% of hands from the button. Half as many. From the hijack seat, these offsuit hands go way down in value, like Queen 9, King 8, Ace X, and the junky suited hands or marginal suited hands also go way down in value. Under the gun 8, which means first act if we were playing 8-handed, now we're only getting to play 18.8% of hands, 40 big blinds deep. We're only getting to play the absolute best hands because when we raise, we have to worry about all the other players yet to act. And this is purely because our position is really bad. Let's take a look at big blind defense ranges. So now what we're looking at is how we're going to play from the big blind against a min raise from our opponent, 40 big blinds deep, depending on their position. So here we have big blind versus an under the gun 8 raise first in. We're presuming the opponent's raising with this pretty tight range, and that's going to force us to play pretty tight. Notice we're folding a lot of offsuit stuff. Even some Ace X offsuit is folding. Suited gappers or offsuit gappers are folding. And, all this offsuit stuff. Notice we're not really folding suited hands to a 2 big blind raise. Those hands are great. Notice we're also re-raising, 3-betting, the hands in purple, almost none, only 6.8% of the time, because our opponent's raising with this very strong range. When they're raising with this very strong range, we just don't get to get out of line. What about if they're in the hijack raising? Now we're presuming they're raising this wider range of 29% of hands. And you see, we are now re-raising wider for value. We get to add in 9s, 8s, Ace Queen, Ace Jack, Ace Queen suited, etc., right? Plus a few more bluffs. As we raise wider for value, we get to raise with a few more bluffs. Also, we're calling a little bit more often. Notice our calling range is 52.7 compared to 47.4 because the opponent's range is wider in general. Also, we introduce an all-in range, although it's not that much in this scenario. Let's take a look at big blind versus a button raise first hand. This is where things start to change a lot. Now we have a lot of all-ins, even for 40 big blinds. This might be surprising to some people, but this is good, strong game theory optimal poker. Notice 9s and lower go all in some portion of the time, as does Ace Queen, Ace Jack, and King Queen offsuit, plus a few other junky bluffs. And now we're re-raising far wider for value. Pocket 4s and better. If you're going to play them, you're re-raising or going all in. Ace 10 suited and better, Ace King offsuit, and then a smattering of offsuit bluffs. Notice you don't want to use the suited marginal hands to re-raise bluff in this scenario, because in this scenario, if you re-raise and then get shoved on, you'd have to fold. And you don't really want to fold those hands, so instead you re-raise with these offsuit hands, like Queen 8, King 6, Ace 4, 10-7 offsuit, because if you re-raise those and then get shoved on, if your opponent goes all in, you can easily fold. Okay? Notice you also get to call much wider, 61% compared to 52% against the hijack raise, because the opponent's raising a substantially wider range. When they're raising a much wider range, you in turn get to defend wider. So it's not just your position that matters, but also your opponent's position, because your opponent's position informs how wide of a range they are going to play. Now again, all this presumes your opponents are going to play well. If your opponents make some sort of blunder, then you should adjust. For example, say your opponent under the gun, first act, raises with the button range of 50% of hands. Well, then your response, instead of being to play like this, as you would against a normal under the gun raiser, would be to play as if your opponent's raising from the button, because they are playing the button raising range, right? So always make sure you're accounting for what your opponents do incorrectly. You have to make sure you know what they're doing incorrectly, and you figure that out by paying attention. You can't sit there and be watching TV or reading a book or playing on your phone. You have to pay attention to what your opponents are doing wrong, because in the small stakes games, your opponents are going to make mistakes left and right. And if you know how to play well and then know how to adjust from playing the game theory optimal strategies to capitalize on their mistakes, that's going to allow you to be hugely profitable in the small stakes games. Finally, let's discuss bet sizing. I have this chart. Feel free to take a screenshot. Essentially, as the stack depths decrease, you're going to use smaller raise and re-raise sizes until you're putting in about 30% of your stack. And if at some point you would have to put in 30% of your stack, usually you're going to go all in instead. So let's go through this chart. Here we have 60 big blinds to 125 big blinds, so kind of deep stacked. When they fold to you, make it 2.7 big blinds before the flop. 3 is also fine. So say you're playing 50, 100 blinds, you'd make it 275 if you wanted to raise. When there's a limper, you're going to make it about 4.5 big blinds over the limper, which is about a pot-sized raise. When you're facing a raise, if someone raises before you, you're going to make it 3 times their raise when you're in position. So if you're playing 50, 100, and they make it 300, you make it 900. From out of position, you're going to want to make it bigger because you want to essentially make the stack to pot ratio smaller, which decreases your opponent's positional advantage. From out of position, you want to do everything you can to minimize your opponent's advantage, and you do that by making the pot bigger initially. So you're going to find that you always re-raise bigger from out of position. So we're going to make it 4x. When facing a 3-bet, so this is when we raise and someone 3-bets, we're going to make it 2.75 times their amount from in position and 3.25 from out of position. And then you can go through this chart. I'm not going to go through and read it all the way, but you see, as you get shallower, you're going to use smaller sizes. For example, 60 to 35 big blinds, you're going to raise to 2.5 big blinds when folded to instead of 2.75. As you get even shorter, we go down to 2.25. And then when we have 12 to 22, you're going to raise minimum. Now, for simplicity, just purely for simplicity, I have all in when you're at fewer than 12 big blinds. But I definitely do recommend studying game theory optimal strategies because there will be spots where you should min raise, especially from various positions against specific opponents, especially. For example, say you know you can raise and your opponents are only going to go all in with really good hands, but they're going to call with marginal stuff. You should definitely be min raising, right? Because you can min raise decent hands, and then if they go all in, you can fold because you're very likely dominated. Let's take a look at when facing a raise, 12 to 22 big blinds over here. Notice I have us going all in. Why is that? Say someone makes it 2.5 big blinds and you wanted to re-raise to, let's say, 6 big blinds, but you only have 15 big blinds. If you put in 6 out of your 15, your opponent's getting pretty good odds to call and try to outdraw you. And if they go all in, you have to put in 9 to try to win 30 plus the blinds and the antes, which means you only need to win about 30% of the time. And pretty much every hand's going to win about 30% of the time. So because of that, you would rather just go all in yourself. And this is a good example where if a re-raise or a raise would put in more than about 30-ish% of your stack, you should probably go all in. So you can go through this chart, like I said, print it out, save it, and reference it, because this chart is going to go a long way to helping you make sure that you use good bet sizes before the flop and you don't set yourself up to be in a weird stack to pot ratio that's not beneficial for you at all. These are the exact sizes I use when I play against the absolute best players in the world on a regular basis, and I recommend you do too. So that's it for today. We have a few more videos coming out in this How to Crush Small Stakes tournament series for mypokercoaching.com. If you enjoyed this video, do me a favor, click the like and subscribe button down below. Click the notification bell so that you know when the next videos come out. Good luck in your games. Have fun. Thanks for being here, and I'll talk to you next time.